Hey, welcome to another video from the Outdoor Analyst. Today, I've got a fun one for you. This is one that I just love. I love big knives and they don't suck. And yes, we all know Nothing Fancy did a video way back in the day about it. And I feel like most people caught on about the idea, but they still don't really understand why you would ever need a large knife. And for where I live, they are great. And let me kind of give you some context. I'm in the Midwest. It is freaking freezing in the winter and there's insane amounts of snow. Like right now, we've got a foot of snow. It's freaking like -degrees outside and everything is cold and wet. And it doesn't really change throughout the rest of the year as far as moisture goes because anytime it's not freaking freezing and snowy, it is humid AF outside and everything is soaked, everything is wet, and you have to get to the center of logs to basically find some dry wood. It's a pain in the butt to start fires with dead wood in where I live, in my state. It's crazy. It's everywhere, but you still have to freaking split it open to get something useful. And it is stringy, stringy wood. No, I don't know jack about trees, but whatever hardwoods we have, which is pretty much everything's hardwood, it's stringy out here. And that means it's really tough to split with an axe. It really is, especially the smaller stuff. And if you're out just camping or you're at your home, you know, you're just splitting logs for the fireplace or whatever you're using, it's kind of tough to split that stuff. And that's why I like big knives and where they come into play for me. Now, when I'm way out west, I'm rolling in Colorado, rolling in Utah on high elevation, yeah, I get it. You do have to split logs there too to get into that nice dry wood. But you know what? Freaking live in the flatlands, and guess what? We need it too. And I love axes. Don't get me wrong. I use the living death out of my Gransfors Brooks small forest axe for little stuff. I absolutely love it. For a lot of campfires and things, I'll use my little Gransfors outdoor axe. I have beat these things to death, resharpened them so many times, and they have held up amazingly. But there's still a lot of tasks that I will take a large fixed blade over any day of the week just because of the wood that we have. And probably one of the knives that I've split the most with, surprisingly, is going to be this little Falk Kniven A1, is because this thing has gone through more kindling than freaking just anything. It is a beast. It is a 1/4 inch thick, which is key. It's a convex edge, but it's saber ground, so it starts here, it's flat, and it makes a wedge. So all you have to do is put this on top of your log. It only has to go that far in before it splits and wedges out. This is a stainless VG10 steel surrounded in 420. VG10 has split more logs for me than pretty much anything, and I still have no issues with it. As long as you're not actually letting it hit the ground, you're not going to get chips. This stuff is great. And I love 3V, I love carbon steels, but in reality, if I've split more with this, not had any issues, guess what? Stainless steel works just fine. So just a heads up, you don't have to get the toughest steel in the world when I'm splitting the gnarliest, stringy logs and having no issues with what I would consider to be a fairly inferior steel nowadays in 2021. This stuff still works great and it's easy to sharpen back up. So just a heads up, you don't have to have the best. This is still kind of, I'd call it a slightly pricey knife. It was when I picked it up years and years ago. And it is awesome. It is absolutely awesome. It's been beat to death. Now, the reason why these are kind of on the bottom, guess what? These are smaller. This is also 3V. This is a Dark Timber Honey Badger. It has gone through a crazy amount of kindling. But guess what? I have issues with these because, believe it or not, they're too small. Super ergonomic, they hold shock really well, and that's important when you're dealing with handles and you're beating it at the other end with a freaking piece of wood. Shock matters. So get a good ergonomic handle. The next one that I've spent tons and tons of time with is the Bark River Grizzly. They don't make these anymore, sorry. This has my own custom handle on it. This thing is freaking awesome. It splits super well. It is a full convex, but it's still basically a saber rex from back here on. Splits awesomely from that point. I have taken trees with this. I've cut in logs, split logs, tons of logs with it. Works really, really great. This one's just new to me as of just a couple days ago. Bark River, Shiny Mountain Bowie. It's just cool. This is the Inglorious Bastards knife. It's just freaking awesome. I'll beat the death out of this later. It's more for looks. I just wanted it. And a newer one to me is Dark Timber Cave Bear. Wanted to see if they had upped their quality on stuff. They got a little better. They finally flushed up the majority of stuff. It's still not flush. These handle scales are definitely not hand done. They're still missing. There's issues with it, but as far as the knife goes, it works really well. For splitting, it's great. Dropped a bunch of logs with it already. It just cuts right through them. Has a good split to it. You have to get a little deeper in just because of how tall it is. That's fine. You just smack it in a little more and then it splits just fine. Very great knife, rolling like 10-inch blades. And that's kind of the benefit of these, is on a larger piece of wood, you don't have to start at the edge. You can just go right to the middle and split it out that way, because these are so long where I'm at. And that's perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Now, another reason why I like large knives is because I clear the deer trails all the time. In the woods, you want to make sure your deer stands are clear. You can get to them quietly, and guess what? Whenever spring rolls around, everything grows incredibly fast where I live. And you wouldn't believe what can just pick up and cover those trails. It is insane how fast it goes, and I've gone out there with axes to clear trees. Most of the real big trees, they're gone now. This is perfect to carry out. It's nice and light. It'll take care of, your 3-inch trees, no problem. But it sucks to take care of brush and other random stuff in the way with an axe, because you're swinging around a really heavy head. And if you're just going after something small, even this is tough. It's not very safe. It's not very fun. It doesn't work very well. And most people say, well, get a machete. Well, guess what? Some of this stuff is still stringy, and you still have to take down some little small trees that are growing up and getting in your way, or really small branches that machetes just aren't really... It's hardwood. They're not really meant to go after that. So a nice knife that's a little thicker, doesn't have the flex, is great to do both of those. So big knives are awesome in that situation. And at the end of the day, yeah, whatever's left over is usually going to be a fire, and I split a bunch of stuff. And anything that I am quote-unquote cross-cutting, guess what? I'm not going to use a freaking axe or a freaking knife. I'm going to use a saw, because I'm exhausted at the end of the day. Most woodwork needs done with a saw versus anything, and when you're splitting, either a splitting hatchet, which this is actually great. For a lot of wood, this is amazing, and if it's not stringy and it's actually, well seasoned, this will split right through it way easier, but you're still swinging it, and that's kind of one thing. So you gotta give and take. If it's stringy and you're exhausted, it's much safer just to take a giant knife, lay it on top of the log, and smack it with another piece of wood. It's much safer, and it seems like less energy too. And I don't have to even think about it. Don't have to worry about safety at that point. It's much simpler. Whereas if you're swinging around this thing when you're freaking exhausted at the end of the day and splitting stuff, yeah, it's a little more dangerous, a little more into it. So that's just kind of my take on it. For where I live, big knives are awesome, especially for in the house. If you're just splitting firewood, you don't want to swing around anything and it's stringy, this stuff works great. These are awesome, awesome choices. Make sure you get something that has a wedge shape to it. I love saber ground, where it's just, saber up here at flat, goes down to a regular double bevel, or saber vex. Flat goes down to a convex. This is actually convex here, so this is a great saber vex. Yeah, it didn't come originally that way, but I made it convex, and now it's freaking fantastic. That has a laser beam now. And get a big one. Don't be afraid of the size of it, because it's about splitting logs. And the bigger the knife is, essentially, it's easier to split. Get it nice and thick, make that wedge. That way you don't have to worry about having a smaller knife like this, where you only have that much blade space to play with. So now I have to get a log that's really about that small so I can hit it on the other side too. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Much easier with a much longer blade. You can do a lot bigger logs, smack through it, and split them really nicely. So that's why big knives don't suck. They're great for clearing brush where I'm at. They are great for splitting logs that are stringy, and they're much safer at the end of the day when you're exhausted. So yeah, and they're just cool. I mean, shoot, sure you can have them for defense too. I guess that's something. I always have a much better tool than a freaking knife for that on me, but that's all you got. Yeah, there's intimidation, I guess, if you're going to roll that route. For me, I think I'm generally going to be intimidating our squirrels out in the woods, but that's about it. There is something cool with that. Most of these I love because I can feather stick with them. Do I always carry a better feather sticking knife on me? Generally I do. I will have an LT Wright or a Adventure Sworn or something like that that I love to feather stick with. But hey, if you only got one, yeah, actually these all work really well. I like the dual purpose. They're comfortable in that area, and that's why these big knives don't suck. I love 3V steel, A2's okay. I've had several A2 steel knives and I beat the living death out of them. Gone through tons of logs. I have not noticed any difference except in edge retention between 3V and A2. And I guess stainlessness actually. This will rust way faster than 3V will. And yeah, 3V does rust where I live fairly quick. You gotta be careful with it. It actually pits. Which sucks even worse because you don't really see the rust, and all of a sudden now you got holes that are just, it just looks like a hole there. This is a secondary knife. Somebody left this in water and you can see all the pits on it. That little jackass didn't take good photos when I bought this thing, but I took care of it. They don't go any further. But yeah, that's what happens to 3V versus rusting. You get all those little dots, they're pits, and once you stop them and you get all that out, they actually do stop. But that's what happens to 3V. So it is kind of annoying, but it rusts less quickly than A2 will. A2 will just absolutely rust like crazy on you, which is why I generally don't have it. But shoot, Shiny Mountain Bowie, it's freaking cool. What can I say? That's why I bought it. So there you go. I love axes, don't get me wrong. They have their purpose, they have their place, they take them with me. I'll be honest, usually when I'm doing this stuff, I'll take a decent axe, a big knife, and then a nice feather sticking knife with me too. So there, and obviously a saw. I'm not going anywhere out there without a saw. That's the reality of it. So that's why my video. I hope you like it. I hope you got some good info on it, and just know where you are and get the right tools for the right job for you. All right, thanks for sticking with me. Have a good one.